Well, I will share my screen and I'll get started on the presentation. Because of this small group, feel free to kind of interrupt with questions, or we can go in a different direction. I want to make this as helpful and useful as possible to the audience here. So let me see if you are seeing a presentation in presentation mode. Does this look okay?
Looks good.
Excellent. All right. My name is Nick Weber. I lead our cloud services group at the NIH Center for Information Technology. As you've probably heard many times in this seminar, the NIH is a collection of institutes and centers, and the CIT group that we represent here, the team that just introduced themselves, offer kind of technology services and capabilities to all of NIH, as well as to our funded institutions. That is the audience for this virtual grant seminar. And specifically, one of them is this STRIDES initiative that I lead. So just a little bit of background on what kind of leads NIH to want to kind of promote use of commercial cloud computing resources that I'll talk about is where I'd like to start. Talk about the STRIDES initiative and some things that we've done so far, benefits of kind of participation, and then finally how to participate in the initiative. So I'll go through relatively quickly and then leave plenty of time for open discussion. So by way of background, I think this is probably not a surprise to anyone here that just introduced themselves. Biomedical data over the past probably 5 to 10 years have become much larger, much more kind of complex and varied, and working with those data in the ways that we need to do research today has become more complex, and that's kind of been a major challenge that lots of researchers, research institutions have had to address. And kind of what we've seen over the past 5 to 10 years is a shift from the kind of traditional model of working with research data on the left to that on the right. So on the left, we had a traditional model where data was generated or collected as part of a research project, and those data sets were kind of distributed out and shared with collaborators, other researchers who would use kind of versions of their own tools or analysis kind of products to be able to analyze those data. And it resulted in kind of multiple versions of data, multiple versions of sets of tools that were hard to kind of reproduce experiments on, hard to share and put back together in various ways. And that left a lot to be desired. What's happened is we've kind of moved in many ways to a cloud-based model where data and tools are co-located centrally in a cloud environment, and researchers come to kind of work on those data sets kind of in situ on the cloud. And this facilitates a lot more collaboration. It facilitates having single copies of the data in many cases to have to keep up to date and pay to store and all of those things. And it facilitates use of kind of a consistent set of tools that maybe have standards on how we address how to analyze data and make sense of it. So we've seen that the cloud can be very helpful to research, not all research, certain types of research, but there are certain benefits or facets of the cloud that really make it, kind of easily lent toward scientific research. It's always available. You can spin it up as you need to and spin it down, so you don't have to pay for infrastructure and wait for that to get established. It really matches the experimental nature of scientific research, where you can test something, you can easily kind of kind of tear down what you're doing or stop using the tools and try it again. And there's lots of tools and other things that are rapidly evolving for researchers to be able to use. So there's good things that are available. What we've seen and heard from both researchers here at NIH and those across the country that we fund is that when somebody tries to go and use the cloud, there's questions or complexities that come up. How do we pay for it? Who pays for it? From what budget? How do we know how much it's going to cost? How do we build these resources in a secure way, especially if working with kind of sensitive data sets? How do we turn some sort of prototype into kind of a more robust data science tool or resource or system? So we get these questions all the time, and that's been kind of a driver for a lot of what we've been thinking about for some time at NIH to kind of help lessen the burdens that are associated, or the barriers that are associated in moving to the cloud. So, about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, NIH came out with the strategic plan for data science. I heard Amin say you've been following our data science activities for some time now. There's a report kind of out there on the web that we can share that kind of walks through the various goals and objectives that NIH has for moving forward in data science. And strides that I'll talk about here in a second, kind of comes into play primarily in the data infrastructure side, where we're trying to optimize how we store, compute on secure data, and we have some partnerships in place to help facilitate that with commercial cloud service providers like Amazon and Google. But we also help across a number of these tenets in the strategic plan for data science on helping to make sure, as people move to the cloud, what are the resources and information and capabilities that they need to modernize data repositories and tools. In terms of the workforce development pillar, the fourth one there, Strides has a major training initiative that I'll talk about here that also helps to make sure we can understand how to use these new capabilities and technologies. And then I think we also support some sustainability and stewardship of resources in how we work with Strides that I'll talk about in terms of how we kind of collect data on and report on how people are using tools, how much it costs, those sorts of things. So I'll come back to this reference a few times. So the Strides initiative was kind of born out of those opportunities, those challenges, the data science strategic plan coming to play, and essentially kind of what it is kind of a set, like I mentioned, of commercial private-public partnerships that NIH has with AWS, with Google Cloud, future additional commercial partners kind of in the pipeline to really bring the benefits of those tools and technologies to bear to the research endeavor in a kind of faster way, a more streamlined way, kind of a cheaper way. I'll talk about discounts and other things, and really enhance the ability for NIH-funded researchers to use these technologies to accelerate their research outcomes. So STRIDES stands for what you see here on the screen, the Science and Technology Research Infrastructure for Discovery, Experimentation, and Sustainability. What we're trying to do is kind of make strides or headway in making this kind of an option, an easy option for where it makes sense for researchers to use these technologies and kind of really apply them to the work that they're doing. So I like to say here that Strides is not kind of a destination. It's not it's a place for me to put my data. That's not what Strides is. Strides is a framework and kind of something that you can leverage and participate in to really work more easily to use existing services that exist out there in the marketplace from Amazon, from Google, from these other companies to do so with some best practices, with some support, with some cost discounts, with some training associated with it, and other things that I'll talk through here in the next few slides. So again, those benefits to research programs include, and I'll go into these in a little bit more detail, but kind of cost discounts, access to pretty significant professional services and support packages, extensive training opportunities for lots of different folks, who support research, the kind of research IT folks, the kind of core enterprise IT folks, in addition to the scientific researchers, data scientists and others who are involved in this are all kind of benefits that I'll walk through. And then when you aggregate those to research programs to get benefits in aggregate to NIH, and I'll say NIH extended to the broad biomedical research community as a whole, what we kind of see and why we've invested in this is we have the opportunity for additional data protection for using some of the best kind of capabilities that exist out there from big Fortune 5 companies who use their whose technologies are used by countries across the companies across the globe. And we want to bring some of those data protections to scientific research data that we need to make sure we maintain the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of. We also see ecosystem development possibilities where the more kind of researchers who are building in kind of consistent ways on the cloud, using standards, using kind of common approaches and tools, the more we can connect data resources and make this easier to kind of have new research data sets and research programs plug into. And then I mentioned a little bit before those trends and insights that NIH sees by being able to see, okay, what's getting heavily used? What are some things that we definitely need to make sure we're having long, kind of sustainability plans around, given how important those data sets are, et cetera. So that's kind of strides at a 30,000 foot level. I want to talk about some of what's been done to date with strides, including kind of some of the highlights that we often share kind of when we're presenting. All right, who's using this? How much is this being adopted so far? So I'll kind of go through these pretty quickly, but I mentioned that NIH is a collection of institutes and centers, or ICs, that you see here. So 18 of our 27 institutes and centers have been participating either by providing funding for research programs across the country to use, or to use it directly themselves for what we call our intramural research programs. We have nearly 50 what we call our extramural research institutions. These are the academic institutions and medical and academic research centers that we fund. Nearly 50 of those participating so far. A few hundred projects that you see here that have been onboarded, many people trained, lots of data. When I say 95 petabytes, a petabyte of data is the equivalent of 20,000 4-drawer filing cabinets full of text. And there's kind of lots of kind of research data moved to the cloud as part of strides, benefiting from kind of cost discounts and other things, support, et cetera, that are part of the program. A fair amount of compute, kind of cost metrics here that at least demonstrate that there's real intention and moving forward of NIH to move to the cloud with cost savings back to those participating programs based on the negotiated discounts. So that's kind of strides at a high level. A sampling of some of those research institutions that have been participating so far. I won't spend too much time on this, but again, I mentioned there were 48 in the prior slide. Here's another sampling of kind of not the institutions, but the research programs that have been supported via strides. Some of these are kind of major, heavily funded, trans NIH sort of activities that you may be familiar with, and these are maybe 15 or so of the 279 listed on the previous highlight slide. So that's kind of again 30,000 foot view of strides. And while we talk about some of those numbers of number of programs and number of dollars saved, and numbers of bytes of data, et cetera, what we're really here to support, obviously, is the kind of scientific impact of what is moving research data, research programs, analytical tools to these cloud platforms really enable for science. So I'll go through a couple of success stories of strides here briefly to get a flavor for that. But for one of those programs, which is an NHLBI, Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute funded program for kind of whole genome sequencing and longitudinal kind of cardiovascular studies called TopMed. What they've been able to do is really kind of move all of their research programs from wherever the data were located previously on lots of different kind of study sites into a central kind of data resource called the Biodata Catalyst to really make it easier for researchers to come and analyze those data in one place. Kind of extending that a little bit, they've also developed what's called an imputation server, which is a kind of highly computational analytical tool that was able to process all of those data that were moved together. It allows researchers to process those data. And as you can see on the right, they've kind of compressed a year's worth of data processing into a couple of months because of the computational resources that have been made available in the cloud, and the support that they've gotten from NIH and from, in this case, Amazon Web Services to really scale up that computational capability for this program. Another brief example here is that NIH has moved our entire sequence read archive or SRA data set. These are kind of genomic sequence data, next-gen sequence data, and annotations of many species, not just humans, but lots of other organisms. Moved all of that to the cloud with the intention of being able to have a place where people could come, since this is many petabytes, and that's not something that you can just download and run locally, analyze locally, but you can bring tools to the cloud and compute across those large kind of bodies of data, and hopefully get new insights that you wouldn't be able to get by only computing on a subset of the data. And that's exactly what happened with a petabase scale sequence alignment that was done by a company called Ceratus. So a petabase is 1,000 trillion bases, or 10 to the 15th number of nucleotide bases in these genomic sequences, and they've been able to do on the cloud, because we've moved that data there, this analysis, and again, take and really reduce the amount of processing time to a few days that would have taken, in their estimation, over a year, because this data is available on the cloud. And this is specifically coronavirus and related data sets that obviously are really important, and we want to make broadly available for kind of the broad response to the current pandemic. So again, those are a couple of the success stories that we kind of like to highlight on what is bringing data and resources and research programs to the cloud help to enable. When you put this all together in a big picture sort of sense, NIH is really looking to move many of not only our kind of highest visibility research programs, but many of those, the 300,000 kind of research awards and programs that we fund to the cloud, with the idea of kind of having programs like our Kids First Pediatric program, our environmental influences on health outcomes for children program, our Cancer Moonshot program, the Brain Initiative, our opioid initiative called HEAL, our All of Us research program, looking to enroll 1 million participants for kind of personalized medicine sort of purposes. In addition to hundreds of other research programs that may not be as large or kind of heavily funded by NIH, but can also benefit from many of the same approaches and capabilities. What we're trying to do is bring that into kind of a space where these can be connected together, or you could bring your data and compare against these large kind of data resources and data sets that would hopefully introduce the ability to get new insights across all of these data sets that are co-located in cloud environments, structured in similar ways, made available. You probably heard of the FAIR acronym: findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Those are all things that we want to make sure we're making available to these programs and many more who are considering moving to the cloud via the STRIDES initiative. So, kind of the upshot of this that we like to describe, and this comes from our Director of Data Science Strategy, Dr. Susan Gregorek, is kind of as we pull together lots of different types of information, including, for example, CT scans, including kind of demographic or kind of social, neighborhood, geographic information, including personalized medicine information, and including kind of your point of care physicians, diagnostics. The question that we hope to be able to uncover is, when we can pull this all together in cloud environments, we really see the opportunity, the benefit of what this can mean for all kind of health outcomes and all the things that we're trying to kind of achieve here in biomedical research. So that's kind of the big picture vision. You can't do that with the flip of a switch. We can do that a little bit at a time, and we hope and like to think that we're contributing to that in some small way by enabling many of the research programs to take advantage of these agreements and these capabilities. So just to kind of go through in a few more details what the STRIDES benefits are. I'll walk through this. I don't have too many more slides, and I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions. But kind of as we walk through this, I think I've heard from others it's helpful to know, right, what does this really mean in terms of these benefits. So for cost discounts, this varies by cloud service provider, sometimes by the specific service, whether it's storage or compute or data transfer, but up to 25%, which can really help bring research institutions and research programs to the cloud to be able to make it more cost effective. We also see, the more participants there are in Strides, the more volume of expenditures there are. And the way the cloud works is that the unit-based pricing goes down when the volume goes up. So as we aggregate charges, costs continue to go down. So that's very helpful. We have access to kind of premier level enterprise support, which doesn't need to be a separate cost to a research institution or a researcher. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's another kind of cost savings. There are discounts and waivers where it's written off entirely for data egress, transferring data out of the cloud, like downloading it. And there's also discounts available for training, for professional services that I'll talk through some examples of. So these are kind of a few of the cost benefits that are available by going through this program, Strides, to get to the cloud, as opposed to kind of working with your, only with your kind of local institution to get to the cloud. And we'll help to manage those relationships. I'll talk about that in my final few slides to help any research institution that we fund participate in Strides and get everything set up. So regarding those professional services, one of the things that we found and we've heard from a lot of those participating in Strides is that kind of getting those people who know how to help you migrate your data or understand a specific tool or think about a problem in a different way are some of the most important and impactful things that can be provided in this transition. So that's part of the Strides initiative as well. There's lots of ability to participate in existing events that are going on. We run office hours and lots of things that are open to anyone participating. We also enable research and development kind of collaborative engagements. I give some examples here about how a couple of institutions came together and funded some data de-identification pilot work for removing personally identifiable information from I think chest CT scans and other image data that can be kind of brought back to the rest of the community and shared so that people can leverage kind of those algorithms, those capabilities for similar work that they might be doing. And you see other activities here that people have done through the professional services relationships made easily available through Strides. Additionally, there's enterprise support that has lots of really useful capabilities for researchers made available. So this is a slide from AWS. Google has a similar sort of one, but this one kind of depicts it pretty well to show that being part of this initiative results in access to these health dashboards and cost optimization tools and people who can give kind of white glove support or address an incident that might come up. Sit down if there's a kind of thing that needs to be architected. That's all part of what comes with the Strides initiative, and it isn't something that you would have to kind of negotiate and figure out on your own. So we've heard a lot of good feedback that these additional benefits are extremely helpful to help manage that transition for a research institution, a research program, or individual researcher to the cloud. Training, which I think we'll get into a little bit more probably in the Q&A, is another major activity. I showed in a previous slide that we've trained over 2,500 people in less than a year. We run trainings all the time. These range from kind of 101 level courses, what is the cloud, how can I use it, to really applied courses, big data, machine learning, those sorts of things. Everything in between, infrastructure, application development, networking, other things like that that are part of what skills the kind of group of people working to help research programs move to the cloud need to have. And every course that we offer, and these are subsidized by NIH, but every course that we offer, we see wait lists and so much interest, and we can't offer them quickly enough or kind of frequently enough for the demand that's there. So there's a lot of benefit, to the training offerings that exist, and an ability for a research institution to kind of also use the agreements that we have to be able to pay for dedicated training, extensive dedicated training as needed for a given kind of set of researchers at their institution. And then I kind of went through this one earlier, so I won't spend too much time on it, but these insights are very helpful. Strides also provides to any participant monthly cost and usage reports, access to a dashboard of information so you can look and see your trends, those sort of things. So you don't necessarily have to become kind of an expert in cloud billing and how this is, what the payments and other things are going to be like. That's a service that is, kind of provided centrally, and we help to set up billing alerts and notifications and other things like that, so when any funds are kind of running low, and you or your institution would need to add funds to the award to be able to continue work. Additionally, I mentioned those data protections. This is something that I think we all kind of have a clear understanding that protecting this data as an asset that we're working so hard to generate or collect is critically important. And there's lots of capabilities, including through those professional services relationships I mentioned earlier, to get help with how to properly secure and manage access to data, including sensitive data. And then the ecosystem development, we've been developing and putting together a compendium of resources such as playbooks specific to a cloud service provider. How do you do this for healthcare and life sciences? How do you do data management in the cloud? High performance computing. We work with lots of other programs. I didn't have an acronym here, but one of the major other initiatives that ODSS has funded is called the Research Authentication and Authorization Service. And this really enables all of NIH funded resources to use the same set of kind of credentials, your home institution's username and password, to log into different systems and not have to worry about, well, how do I get access to data here? And if it's controlled data as part of a kind of human participant study trial or something like that, this project called RAS is really helping to reconcile access to those controlled access data sets. So building that into this kind of ecosystem, again, really helps to further that picture I showed earlier of all these data resources, all these data sets available in the cloud, and analyzing across them to get new insights that we wouldn't have been able to get if we don't have things like this. So last couple of slides here, and then open it up to questions. Kind of how to participate. If any of this was of interest to you, or you think it may be of interest to some of your colleagues or folks at your institution, kind of there's a set of steps that we can share some additional information on. We have some guides and onboarding guides to be able to share, but I'll talk through it at a high level. So first off, we like to think of this process of moving to the cloud as kind of a journey. And our customers could be, from a Strides perspective, could be researchers, it could be the research and IT department, kind of CIOs or the cloud team that may exist at a research institution. But in any case, whoever kind of the customer ends up being, and it varies by institution, kind of goes through this same set of kind of onboarding activities, we call them. So we kind of start with, all right, somebody's heard about Strides like you're doing here in this virtual grant seminar. So we have some outreach materials. Then there's a process for an institution to kind of enroll to be able to participate in the program. That enrollment step has a couple of options that I'll talk about in the next slide. But essentially, it's to be able to make all of those benefits that I described earlier available to you and your research institution. So that's enrollment. Then there's a set of provisioning and configuration steps that happen. This is to kind of get you access once your institution has enrolled, get you access to a cloud account, a space where you can do work and set up, kind of your data, your tools, your resources, and then configure those to make sure that they're optimized for use for your particular use cases. And we have some support structures that can help in those couple of steps. All along the way, there are training opportunities that you can take to learn, how do I do this? How do I optimize this for performance, for cost? What's new capabilities that are kind of emerging that I want to know about for the type of research that I'm doing? And then you're kind of into this use cycle of, all right, I'm operating this on a day-to-day basis. This is how I do my work. And we like to think of this as a happy customer of Strides will then help to inform outreach for their collaborators, their colleagues, et cetera, to say, hey, have you heard about this program that NIH has? And then the journey starts anew for others at your institution or at other institutions. So the last slide that I have kind of goes through those onboarding and enrollment paths. My general recommendation is if you're interested, a next step would be to email strides@nih.gov. That's our managed, kind of mailbox that we have that will kind of follow up with all the written materials, the steps and things to go through how to enroll. But in general, I like to try to make sure these two paths that I referenced earlier are clear. So let me kind of just walk through those, and then I'll stop with this presentation and take questions. So on the left-hand side, path number 1 here is something that some NIH institutions, institutes that may be a funding institute for your research program have chosen to go down. So I'll use the Common Fund as an example. So the Common Fund, what they tend to do is they say, we're going to put Common Fund, kind of award dollars onto these STRIDES agreements that we have with AWS or with Google. And then we're going to delegate a specific research program that we fund to be able to draw down on those dollars. So, let's say it's, they have various programs. One that I'm familiar with from a previous life is the Human Microbiome Program. Let's say they say, okay, the Human Microbiome Program, they want to use Amazon in an example here. We're going to authorize, $100,000, whatever that amount is, for them to draw down on those funds. And then we just work with the research institutions involved with Human Microbiome Program to make sure they have all the access that they need and authorization to draw down on money Common Fund has put on to be able to do their work. And then we work with them to make sure they understand all these other offerings, training, professional services, et cetera. So that's a path that may be available to you. Again, you'd have to work with your program officers, with your institution, your funding institution, to be able to understand if that's a path that's amenable to that institution. The more likely path is the one on the right. So let me kind of walk through that, that one. This is where a research institution, and I have the example of Johns Hopkins University here, happens to be an institution that we fund pretty heavily here at NIH. That institution can enroll by going through a set of steps to coordinate at the institution level with our commercial cloud service provider partners. And essentially what happens is a business agreement is set up that says, all right, Hopkins is going to be working with AWS or with Google. They're going to cite the terms of our STRIDES award, our STRIDES agreement rather, that include the discounts, the other things that are part of the program. And then once that relationship is established, it's kind of a payment relationship, then any NIH funded researcher at Johns Hopkins can take advantage of the program. And how that works is that funding that has been made available or in the future will be made available to a researcher who's receiving award funds from NIH, you can use those award funds to pay directly through that relationship. We'll help you get set up with cloud accounts and provision and configure and all of those things that we talked about before. And you'll use your award dollars to be able to pay for the consumption of the resources as you store data, as you compute on data. The pay as you go that I mentioned earlier, that'll come out of your kind of let's say R01 award or whatever award type that you have. So that's kind of a second path. Both of them are possible, both of them are in use, but I like to make sure people know that these are a couple of different examples of how research programs or institutions enroll. So with that, hopefully that was a helpful overview. I know there was a lot there, but I just wanted to kind of give it an update on what we're doing and why we think it can be helpful to some research programs and researchers. Glad to answer any questions that you have now. Feel free to reach out to me. Here is my email or the strides@nih.gov email address, and we'll get back with you on how to proceed to participate. So I'll stop sharing my screen now, and we'll be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Nick. That was great. Very informative. I'm glad that I signed on to this Slack channel because I didn't know about this program at all. So this is the first I'd heard of it. I'm curious about my situation, which is I'm part of a program grant through NIH. It's part of the IDEA program, the IMBRI grant. And since you just spoke to Ben King in Maine, I don't know if he was speaking on behalf of his program, but how we could leverage something like this and what that arrangement would look like. It sort of seems like it's not quite either of the ones that you described. I don't know if NIGMS is somehow involved in it and we would go through them, or if we would go through our lead institution for our grant, so University of Vermont. But we work with a lot of partner institutions throughout the state, undergraduate institutions. So I don't know how that would work with an agreement from UVM, how somebody from a different institution can then gain access to that resource. But any insight that you may have on how to navigate that would be great.
Yeah, it's very timely. And you know, the meeting that we had yesterday that included Ben King had a bunch of NIGMS folks, including the director, Dr. John Lorsch, and you know, other division directors, including the IDEA Network kind of program director on the call as well. And we talked through some of this because the, you know, especially the IDEA program and the way that INBRE and especially the Northeast region works, where you all are, I think, 5 states kind of coordinated as you know, one set of related activities. How would that work when it's many institutions? And what I described was, you know, kind of the, you know, well, do we do it by NIGMS putting money on the award, and then all these different people can kind of come and draw down? That's a possibility. Another one is, as you described, the lead institution or a delegated, it doesn't have to be the lead institution, would be the one through which the money would flow. We can certainly set it up so that access to other institutions, you know, researchers as part of the network can use that infrastructure. But the bigger question, and what we're going to follow up on, is, you know, kind of part of the transition to cloud is, you know, kind of it's a data center, right? It's all the services that are part of a data center, and it takes a team. It's not just one person working. So you have to kind of get that capability you know, established, and maybe it's, you know, one of the research institutions as part of the network kind of runs that part of things, and then works with all the other people in the INBRE network to be able to use that same, I'll call it, you know, cloud environment that has some management around it and support around it. But that's kind of where we landed in the call yesterday, was there's a couple different ways to do this. We're going to go back and think about the relative, you know, pros and cons of those different ways. But the intent is to have, you know, networks like what you have also be a model that we can support. So I hopefully the next time you hear this presentation or others hear it, there will be 3 options in that last one, where it says, well, if you're not a single research institution, or the first option doesn't work for you, what does it look like if you're a network or a consortium or those sorts of things that have multiple institutions involved at once? But, you know, very good question. And we can loop you into further conversations if you'd like, or talk with Ben, because, you know, these are things that we're actively, you know, kind of discussing, and I think we have another meeting even next week with folks to follow up on how we could make this work.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome.
Yes, my questions are kind of along a similar line. It sounds like my understanding of your presentation is that this is something that we could integrate our research into, either through our university, like in my case, it would be the University of Colorado, or through a funding institute that had decided to participate. And on the individual grant or research level, that is not necessarily how you become involved. Like if I'm developing a grant, creating a multi-center database, would we start partnering with you to talk about integrating that with Strides on the grant development level? Or once we have a funded grant for a research network that's not necessarily institute specific, again, that research organization doesn't necessarily partner directly with you. It's either through the NIH Institute or the academic institution?
Yeah, good question as well. So on the development of a grant application or a proposal side, we have spoken with people just to kind of say, well, here's the information that you may want to know about. You can reference, and others have, you know, we would anticipate taking advantage of strides for developing this. And if you know which cloud service provider you want to use, or maybe some of the infrastructure that you think would be part of this, you could put as part of your proposal or budget process, what you think it might cost at a high level. And there's some resources to be able to help with, kind of some of those cost estimations that we could help you out with. But then it's primarily after award where we would get more involved to kind of say, okay, you're now eligible. Eligibility is any NIH funded, awardee. It could be through a grant, a cooperative agreement, various mechanisms, but that deems you eligible, and then you can take advantage of the cost discounts and some of the other things. There are some exceptions to that. So, for example, if you're interested in some of the trainings early on, there are some opportunities to participate in those kind of before being fully made eligible and enrolled in the program. But by and large, it's post-award where we get more involved with folks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Nick. This was an excellent and very informative presentation. Thank you so much again. And so along this last question is the same thing. So when we are trying to integrate, like, let's say I'm trying to integrate the NIH strides into my grant proposal, for example, right? And I would like to have some kind of, like, for example, when you talk cost, you need to have some kind of metrics, right? Some kind of approximate idea how that should be handled. So what are the resources available to do so? And also you mentioned specifically with regard to training, also for me, for example, I would like to know the exact tools that are available so I can actually align my proposal with the available tool. And it will be even, ideally, it would be great if I can actually have some access to some kind of training prior to actually join the NIH strides, right? So this, I think, in my opinion, this will give me much more concrete grounds on which I can build my proposal in the long term.
Yeah, great question. So the first one about how do you estimate and what resources are available for cost estimation. We just, some of the things that we do as part of our training program and make broadly available are webinars for how do you even go about thinking about, and this is what Google or Amazon would lead, and they would say, okay, here's some basic best practices for thinking about what types of servers do you need to run in the cloud, memory and IO and those sorts of things. How much data do you have? And then they'd show you some tools on, there's online calculators to be able to kind of, estimate that out. And then you'd have to bring in some, parameters of your own. How many times do I need to run this analysis, or how many users are going to use this tool to be able to get, kind of that full estimate. But I think it gets you part of the way there. And again, once you're on and participating in strides, there's also some cost optimization capabilities, some of which are more automated, that say, well, have you thought about doing this or turning this off or turning this on to save on cost? So, we can certainly share information about those webinars. Some of them are recorded, so you can certainly take advantage of those. And then you can reach out to strides@nih.gov, and we can kind of point you to additional resources, or even get Google or Amazon. They're always interested in talking to prospective customers to meet with you and walk through some things. In terms of the training, what we, I guess I'll answer the tools part first. So generally, any and all of the tools or services that are available on Google or Amazon are available through Strides, right? You just get a discount on them. So if you're using SageMaker on AWS, which is their deep learning tool, or if you're using BigQuery on Google, which is their kind of large data analysis data warehouse tool, those are all available to you. The hard part is there's so many of them to know which one or ones you might want to use. To your point, you would want to participate in a training or have some sort of kind of way to select some of those. So our office hours are a good place to kind of come and ask those sort of questions. Hey, I want to do this sort of research. Which tools would be good to be able to use? So those go on, and you can actually interface with other researchers who may have additional kind of use cases or suggestions for you in addition to our team here at NIH and the cloud teams. And then through that, you can get a sense as to what trainings are upcoming that you may be able to participate in. Some of those are more designed for those who have been kind of enrolled and already participating. But as I mentioned earlier, there are some that are available to those who've not yet kind of participated in the STRIDES initiative, enrolled. We can make sure you know about those when they're upcoming. There's lots of free training online as well, so we can help point you to those to get a sense as to how you want to position, especially if you're applying for a grant, some of those things that you would put in your application on, here's how much I think it's going to cost, here are the tools I'm going to use, I've already been trained on this, so to bolster your case for why this should be funded. So definitely some possibilities there. Happy to talk more or to kind of loop you in on some of those other things I mentioned, the webinars, the office hours, etc., if that would be useful.
Thank you so much, Nick. Yeah, thank you very much.
Any additional questions? Since we had a small group, we had everyone kind of introduce. I see there's Feng Lao. Thanks for joining, Feng Lao, here. He's represents our Office of Data Science Strategy as well. And then there's another person, Melanie. I'm not sure, Melanie, if you would like to say anything to say hello or not, but you're welcome to.
I could say hello. I have an NIGMS grant, and we're doing we're working on how to display AI information to clinicians for risk surveillance. And so I was just interested in hearing, what kind of, because we're building some models for that, to hearing what kind of resources might be available to us that we didn't know about.
Got it. And you mentioned building some models in NIGMS, so the MIDAS program came to mind. Are you working with MIDAS at all?
So right now we're using like PhysioNet and Mimic data, but MIDAS will be something we'll look into. Okay.
If you were working with them already, I might have suggested talking with them. They're one of the programs that we support. They were on one of our slides. So they've gone through the process and could share, kind of their experience. But otherwise, definitely it sounds like the work that you're doing is very well aligned to the types of use cases and research programs that we support through STRIDE. So if you're interested in following up, definitely reach out at strides@nih.gov, and we'll be happy to provide more resources or answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, because the pieces I'm looking for are more, so Mimic has the critical care, but we're looking for general hospital patient data, EHR data. We're also, we're doing some building the models, but then we're also having to kind of rebuild these sort of simulations of what the data would look like to clinicians, which is interesting and challenging. And so I'm looking for easier ways to do that.
Yeah, so it reminds me of something I saw recently from Google, and I'm going to forget. They have TensorFlow, and they have lots of other kind of tools like that for some of this modeling and machine learning sort of stuff. But one of the things that I might recommend is through the STRIDES relationships, we have points of contact from these companies who will, at the drop of a hat, say, yeah, we'd love to go and talk to researchers and kind of tell them, here's some of the services we have, or brainstorm, or those sort of things.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
If that's of interest, if you haven't already spoken with folks, we can get some Google engineers or AWS engineers available to kind of say, here's some of what we got. They love to talk about the tools and things that they have.
Cool.
And learn additional use cases.
Great.
All right.
I have one other quick question. I know we're sort of running out of time here, but I'm wondering, what STRIDES provides is basically funding and discounts. So would we need to have our own expertise in-house to spool up our instances and sort of get everything together independently, or is NIH actually providing infrastructure for all of this?
Yeah, good question. So it's largely, it would happen independently at your institution. We do this at NIH for our intramural research program. So we have some best practices and resources and kind of setup templates that we're happy to share with those at Vermont or wherever who might do this. There are some exceptions to that. I don't want to overstate them because
Yeah.
there are some examples where research programs that we fund at other institutions are using that managed environment that we maintain here at NIH. But that's
Got it.
because there's a very close collaboration between an NIH lab and a
Right.
research program.
Yep. Got it. That clarifies that. And maybe there could be something, you know, if a network kind of agreement is developed that, you know, say the Northeast INBRE or IDEA programs or something like that, there could be something that is shared, a shared environment.
Yep. I think that would be a best practice, a recommendation, because everyone doesn't need to do that all independently. Doing
exactly. Yeah.
would be better.
Yeah, I mean, any information, I know that it's sort of preliminary talks about sort of establishing a relationship and moving forward, but I'd be interested to be sort of kept in the loop on that.
All right,
and I
for
can
sure.
always reach out to you. I have your email now, so I can reach out in the future.
Great, please do.
Thanks a lot.
All right, well, thank you all. There is a Slack channel where if you have additional questions or if you want to reference other people to ask questions, Jackie or Aaron, do you want to post that channel in the chat if you haven't already?
I have posted it, but I will post it again. Thank you, Nick and the Strides team, for coming today. And thank you to our captioner as well. Everything will be recorded and we will have that available as soon as we get it. And there is the Slack channel if anybody's interested. That is for the general chat. And then here is the Stride specific chat.